If you look at a map of the Los Angeles gang war, you might expect a simple picture. The Bloods versus the Crips, red versus blue, but that map is a lie. The Crips are the largest gang in LA, but they have fractured into roughly 100 different sets that are all in a civil war with each other. And then you have the Bloods. Historically, they've been outnumbered 3-1, which has forced them to stay more united. But even the Bloods bond is now breaking. You have the Pirates, who are the original Bloods from Compton, and they are now distinguishing themselves as a major player in the LA gang war. And sitting between them is the wild card, the Hoover Criminals. They used to be part of the Crips, but they've since gone rogue. Now they brand themselves as EBK, which means Everybody Killa, and they've been taking control over some of the most contested blocks in LA's South Side. But that's just the black gangs. The Latino gangs have been operating completely differently. Groups like Florencia 13 and the 38th Street Gang function much more like organized crime groups with ties to the Mexican cartels. While many of the black gangs are fighting over localized blocks, the Latino gangs are fighting over demographics of the city, often engaging in racially motivated wars to push out the black gangs of the city entirely. Using exclusive data and hours of inputting this into our animation software, we've mapped every gang in Los Angeles down to the exact streets that they control. This is the Los Angeles Gang War, mapped. To understand how this war actually works, we need to zoom into Death Alley. Death Alley refers to a 2-mile stretch of South Vermont Avenue that runs from Imperial Highway in the south to Manchester Avenue in the north. The high levels of violence here is mainly due to the fact that there's several different rival gangs all packed into the same area, battling over blocks, apartment complexes, and drug trade on Vermont Avenue. The Hoovers, or otherwise known as the Hoover Criminals, are the most aggressive gang in this area.
Federal and local law enforcement tells us they decided to go after one especially bad gang that is enslaving women and children.
11 alleged gang members, including 6 leaders of the Hoover Criminal Street Gang, now indicted on these really disturbing charges.
As mentioned in the intro, they have an EBK reputation, which means Everybody Killa, and are currently engaged in wars with almost every neighboring set. The Hoover Criminals control large areas of the eastern and northern sides of this corridor. The second major gang of this area is the underground Crips. They control areas mainly west of Vermont Avenue and are specifically headquartered around Normandy Avenue. Their close proximity to the Hoovers means that walking across Vermont Avenue can often mean a death sentence. The violence between these two gangs ramped up to extreme levels in 2015 after a man named Kenneth Peavy, or otherwise known as KP, was shot and killed. KP was part of the underground Crips and was shot and killed on West 109th Street, right in the heart of the conflict zone in Westmont. His death was immediately blamed on the Hoover Criminals, who had been beefing heavily with the underground Crips over territory in the area.
I don't know that they necessarily knew what his association was when they shot him. They were just looking for somebody, anybody on the street. It could have been anybody standing there, in the wrong area.
In a typical gang war, a shooting like this is followed by a quiet, targeted retaliation. This time, however, something different happened. Shortly after KP's death, a hashtag began circling on Twitter and Instagram. It was hashtag 100 days, 100 nights.
My homie told me to ask about 100 days, 100 nights or something like that.
Famous Crip got killed. It was pretty much like exactly what it say, like 100 days, 100 nights, 100 for 100 days and 100 nights. It was just a whole lot of killing.
The underground Crips had made an alliance with other Crip sets and made a promise that in order to mourn KP, they would commit violence for 100 days and 100 nights. The violence wouldn't just be targeted at the Hoovers though. The bet, allegedly, was to see which set of the Crips could rack up the most bodies or kills after the 100 days were up. This threat then went viral. It wasn't just gang members, but it was everyday residents of Los Angeles that were terrified of leaving their homes. The LAPD had to issue statements in an attempt to calm the public, and hashtags like Pray for LA began trending across the country. In the weeks following the trending hashtag, there was a significant spike in shootings in the area. The number of shootings became so widespread that it gave its name to the Death Corridor. But while the underground Crips and the Hoover Criminals were fighting over gang politics in the area, there was a third gang that rose. South Los 13 is a Mexican mafia-backed gang that added a new racial dimension to the violence. In the 2010s, South Los 13 was working with Mexican cartels to target black residents in Westmont. Many of these black residents were perceived as gang rivals, but oftentimes they were just normal citizens. A specific method South Los 13 used to target black residents was called firebombing. Firebombing is when the gang members would buy the materials needed to make an improvised bomb, and then they would throw it into the windows of unsuspecting black residents. They would harass these black residents as much as they could in order to get them to move out of the neighborhood, with the goal of then having the South Los 13 gang members move in.
They say this was a very sophisticated plot. They purchased disguises, gloves, bomb-making materials, and then they divided themselves into two teams, and everybody had a very specific task. One person, his job was to break the windows, the next person would light the firebomb, and the final guy would throw the firebomb inside the residence.
And then dominating much of the southern part of the corridor is the Denver Lane Bloods. The Denver Lane Bloods are distinct in Los Angeles gang culture because they are known to have produced some of the most authentic gangster rap. It's not the polished MTV version, but the raw underground gangster rap. The most famous rapper of Denver Lane was Brandon Woods, known as B. Brazy. He became an underground legend for his unique, aggressive rapping style. In 2003, B. Brazy was lured into a hotel room to meet up with a girl that he thought was cute. Little did he know, the girl was setting B. Brazy up. South Los 13 was also going after the Denver Lane Bloods. When B. Brazy entered that hotel room, he wasn't met by a woman. He walked straight into an ambush. Reports suggest that it was members of the local South Los 13 Latino gang that were there waiting for him. B. Brazy was shot multiple times and left dead in the hotel room. B. Brazy's story was all over the news in Los Angeles and was a testament that even your fame doesn't stop the bullets. But if we move a few miles east on the map, the stakes get significantly higher. We leave the residential neighborhoods and enter the world of the Los Angeles projects.
Everything we doing for real, watch Crips. You'll get murdered out here playing with us. All of us are chickens, right?
In the Watts area, the gang war isn't fought over neighborhood blocks or strip malls, it's fought over massive government-built compounds. First, you have the Nickerson Gardens, which is the largest housing complex west of the Mississippi. This housing complex is the home turf for the bounty hunter Bloods, who have been in a long-standing, often violent war with many of the nearby Crips sets. Out of all the different sets of Crips, the bounty hunter Bloods have mainly been at war against the major two in the area. There's the Grape Street Crips, who operate mainly out of the Jordan Downs housing project, and then the Imperial Project Crips, who operate out of the Imperial Courts housing project. The train tracks running down the border of this Blood versus Crips rivalry is the hard boundary that the gang members avoid crossing. The gang war in this area involves children as young as 10 years old, running around the housing complexes and supplying guns to older gang members. These kids aren't official gang members yet, but they're used as runners, lookouts, and stash boys because the police are less likely to search or arrest children. Police would often watch elementary school-aged boys sprinting between rows of apartment complexes on 113th Street, 114th Street, and Success Avenue, carrying pistols in their backpacks. And then at the southern end of this war is Imperial Highway, or better known as Wall Street by the locals. They called it Wall Street because of the insane amount of money that can be made from selling drugs along this stretch, but then can also be lost within a matter of minutes from a drive-by shooting. Kendrick Lamar used to come from Compton to hang out in the Nickerson Gardens and hang out with the bounty hunter Bloods. There's a famous video of Kendrick freestyling in the Nickerson Gardens before he even became famous.
My rap friends, I ain't saying that you whack, psych. Like an invoice, I'm just stating the facts, right? The metaphors I write. In fact, you've been a factor you feared your whole life. No TV show. Don't compare me with them. That's like Jaws versus Nemo, a gorilla to a chimp. A Jordan versus Cool Coach. A Tony Montana will blow on his nose to a Nino.
Just in 2024, Kendrick Lamar and SZA held a Christmas concert in the Nickerson Gardens to benefit the community. The concert was free and had a line that extended for miles. All attendees were required to bring an unwrapped toy to donate as their ticket to entry. All the gifts collected were then donated to the children of the community. The event ended up becoming a massive success, and the community members are hoping that this becomes an annual tradition. But while Kendrick brought a moment of peace to Nickerson Park, his home just a few miles south is still defined by a much darker history. When we cross the border of Watts into Compton, we aren't just entering another neighborhood, we're entering the global capital of gangster rap. From Kendrick Lamar, Roddy Ricch, Dr. Dre, and even home to Tupac for some time, Compton is where the real gangsters of LA are from. One of the most violent borders between the gangs in Compton takes place at the intersection in Compton Avenue and Long Beach Boulevard. At this intersection, there's 2 Pyrus sets to the north and 2 Crips sets to the south. You have the Southside Crips, which are one of Los Angeles' most notorious Crips gangs, along with the smaller Ward Lane Crips. Then to the north of this intersection, you have the Looters Park Piru set and the Elm Street Piru set. It's important to note that these Piru sets aren't just standard Bloods, they're the original founders of an anti-Crip alliance who have basically divorced themselves from the wider Blood gang to function as their own independent army. Just north of this intersection and further up Long Beach Boulevard is the legendary Mob Piru gang. This is the set that the famous Tupac was a part of.
We are living in a war zone. It's not as easy as these people are making us think, that we just got some criminal black kids with guns. It is not like that. We live in hell. We live in the gutter. We got us stacked up 80 deep in one building.
When news first spread that Tupac was shot and killed in Vegas by the Southside Crips, one of the Piru gang's strongest rivals, violence quickly erupted. For the next 2 weeks, violence along Long Beach Boulevard became a war zone.
All the players that were from Compton came back to Compton. We were told that, hey, Southside was responsible for the shooting of Tupac, so it's coming back to Compton, and what that meant to us, a war was about to start.
Mob Piru members hunted Southside Crips and vice versa. There were 3 homicides and over 10 shootings in Compton that were directly linked to Tupac's death within just the first week of him dying.
It's like playing ping pong. I'm gonna serve it to you, you gotta serve it back. If I might get a slam in, you know what I'm saying? You might get a slam in. But we finna go back and forth until further notice. This finna go down, and that's what was happening. Back and forth, everybody. But that, all they know, they didn't come through the hood and do nothing. Not where we was from. They didn't come to mine.
Well, yeah, 14 people got shot and 4 people got killed.
Yeah.
Also not far from this notorious intersection is the Compton Courthouse. Gang members from all over Los Angeles are forced to come here for their hearings. This frequently leads to hallway brawls or shootings in parking lots and surrounding streets when rivals spot each other attending court. But in September of 2020, the violence in the Compton Courthouse shifted. The shooter wasn't looking for a Crip or a Blood, he was looking for a badge. Deontay Murray was a member of the Compton Vario Tokers and had just recently lost one of his closest brothers in the gang to a shootout with law enforcement. Murray was so grief-stricken by the loss of his gang brother that he wanted revenge on law enforcement. Before his shooting spree began, Murray was already actively committing crimes. On September 1st of 2020, he carjacked a black Mercedes on Bradfield Avenue. He shot the owner in the leg with a high-powered rifle and stole the car. This Mercedes would become his war wagon for the attacks to come. Then 10 days later, on September 10th, 2020, Murray drove this Mercedes to the Compton Courthouse. He saw a man in a suit getting in a car and mistakenly believed that he was a plainclothes detective. Murray pulled up and opened fire on this man, unloading multiple rounds into his vehicle. The victim was actually just a private citizen, not a detective, and just barely survived. This first incident showed that Murray was hunting down law enforcement. Then just 2 days later, on September 12th, Murray returned to the intersection of Compton Boulevard and Willowbrook Avenue, which is where the MLK Transit Center is. 2 Los Angeles police officers were sitting in their patrol SUV outside the train station. Surveillance video showed Murray walking up to the passenger window and opening fire at point-blank range without warning. Both deputies were shot multiple times in the face and head, but quickly tried applying tourniquets to each other to slow the bleeding. Murray quickly fled the scene, and somehow both officers miraculously survived.
1 deputy in the hospital behind me, 1 deputy out. 1 man is a mystery.
3 days later, after this brazen attack, now on September 15th, Murray was spotted in Linwood driving a Toyota Solara. He then led the police on a high-speed car chase and threw his firearm out the window. Murray ended up ditching the car near the 3100 block of Carlin Avenue in Linwood and then fled on foot. A massive police presence swarmed the area and began a manhunt for Murray. This manhunt lasted nearly 10 hours before Murray was finally caught hiding under a chicken coop in a person's backyard. 3 years later, in September of 2023, Murray had his trial in front of a jury. His defense team argued that he did not act with premeditation, but was rather under the influence of drugs and was overcome with grief from the loss of his gang brother. The jury wasn't buying it though, and found Murray guilty on all charges. The judge then sentenced Murray to 166 years in prison. But while Deontay Murray was driven by grief and revenge, the gangs just a few miles north don't operate on emotion. When we leave the chaotic streets of West Compton and enter into the Latino gang belt, there's a massive corridor of gangs that operate like organized crime groups. They have direct ties to the Mexican mafia, have sophisticated tax collection systems, and have a history of aggressive racial violence. We can't talk about the Latino gang belt without mentioning Florencia 13. They're one of the largest and most powerful street gangs in California, effectively controlling the entire unincorporated community known as Florence Firestone. Unlike most gangs in Los Angeles that aren't highly structured, F13 is structured like a corporate company. They have specific subgroups like the Jokers, Malditos, and 76th Street. The Jokers subgroup played part in the F13 gang's most defining moment. It was called Operation Jokers Wild. In the mid-2000s, F13 leaders launched a campaign that was focused on racial cleansing. They wanted to have all of Florence Firestone for themselves and strategized on how to kick out the low-income blacks living in the area. There were members of the East Coast Crips gang living in the area that they didn't like. F13 wasn't just targeting black gang members though. F13 started targeting black civilians.
Florencia gang members allegedly engaged in a series of attacks on rival African-American gangs that extended to innocent citizens who ended up being shot simply because of the color of their skin.
In one notorious case, an F13 member spotted a black man at a bus stop. They didn't ask where he was from or if he was in a gang, they just yelled a racial slur at him and opened fire. The victim unfortunately passed away despite having no affiliation to the gang. This was the breaking point for the Los Angeles Police Department. The LAPD got several federal law enforcement agencies involved, including the ATF, the DEA, and even the FBI, to conduct a raid into the Florence Firestone community. Over 1,300 law enforcement members mobilized together in the early morning hours at 4 a.m., and they all swarmed the neighborhood. They executed arrest warrants at dozens of the locations simultaneously. A federal grand jury then indicted 102 members of the gang. This was an unprecedented raid and the largest ever conducted in the United States. Instead of charging them all with individual state crimes, federal prosecutors used the RICO Act, which was traditionally used against the Italian mafia. The RICO Act allowed them to charge members who were believed to be a part of the F13 gang, even if they weren't actually caught committing any crime. The massive investigation revealed that F13 was not just selling drugs, but they were actually systematically hunting black residents to drive them out of Florence Firestone. But even after this massive raid back in 2007, where they arrested over 100 gang members, F13 only seemed to grow since then. In fact, in August of 2024, federal authorities had to launch another massive RICO takedown against F13. The DOJ indicted 37 more members of F13 in this raid and learned a lot about how the gang evolved over the years. In this one raid, federal agents seized 9 pounds of fentanyl, which is enough to kill millions of people. F13 gang members would hide this insane amount of fentanyl in what they called casitas. A casita looks like a regular house on the outside, but on the inside, they convert it into a makeshift casino with slot machines and poker tables. They are usually dark, filled with cigarette smoke, and are guarded by gang members.
It appears that police officers stumbled onto what appears to be an underground casino, and they were led there by a suspect of all people who ran into the house trying to get away from police.
People will go there to gamble, but the real money isn't being made off the gambling, it's being made off selling drugs to the gamblers. The casita serves as a safe zone where addicts can come gamble and buy drugs in the same house. When the LAPD raided these different casitas in August of 2024, the 9 pounds of fentanyl were split up into over 40,000 pills. In these casitas, the pills were hidden inside slot machines, behind electrical outlets, and even inside AC vents. Many of the pills were also hidden in designated stash houses that didn't have people coming there to gamble and were designated for just storing drugs. This discovery of 40,000 pills laced with fentanyl shows just how sophisticated these Latino gangs can be. But Florencia 13 isn't the only giant in the Latino gang belt. If you just travel a few miles north, leaving Florence Firestone, you enter the industrial corridors of Vernon and Southgate. This is the territory of the 38th Street Gang. The 38th Street Gang is the undisputed power of the modern era and is known as the grandfather of the entire Latino corridor. While F-13 is taking up much of the national headlines, the 38th Street Gang doesn't want that. They're just looking for profit. Members of the 38th Street Gang are part of old money and have been around since the 1920s. While other gangs are fighting over duplexes and apartment buildings, the 38th Street Gang controls the industrial jungle. Their territory is mainly the Alameda Corridor, which is a miles-long stretch of factories, train yards, and warehouses. Within this corridor, one of the main tactics is to rob freight trains. They wait for a train to slow down on a curve, and then they'll run up with box cutters and sever the air brake hose that connects the cars. The train's emergency system then kicks in and forces the train to come to a dead stop. Once the train stops, a group of 10 to 20 38th Street Gang members then swarm the shipping containers. They then don't start hopping into random shipping containers though. They have insiders at the docks and rail yards who let them know exactly which containers have expensive clothing and electronics and which ones just have cheap toilet paper. The gang robs the high-value containers, loads it all into vans there waiting for them, and vanishes before the rail police can even get there in time.
According to an LA Times investigation, at least 10 heists since last March, all involving BNSF cargo trains, netting more than $2 million in stolen Nikes. Authorities say criminal gangs linked to the Sinaloa cartel are behind the thefts.
Ultimately, this corridor proves that the LA gang war has turned into a machine. It's no longer about neighborhood beef. In the Latino gang belt, it's about profiting millions, often at the expense of many people's lives. Zooming back out to the rest of LA, this gang war extends deep into other areas of the county like Long Beach, San Bernardino, the Valley, and even up to Palmdale. Ultimately, looking at the map reveals that this isn't just a simple battle between red and blue. It's an ever-changing war zone where the borders are constantly being redrawn, and the only guarantee is that the conflict will continue to evolve. Another gang conflict that is constantly evolving and is actually even more violent than LA is in Chicago. I did a deep dive into the Chicago gang world, including into the notorious O Block, which you can watch right here.